Talks Oldies, 98.9, 105.3, WGNY FM. On a fun day Saturday morning, it's time now for our segment, Planning Ahead with Megan Conroy. Megan, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Not too bad for an old guy. I'll tell you that. Megan, if you would, kicking things right off the bat here, give us your law firm's contact information and your contact information, please.
Sure. So my name's Megan Conroy. I'm a partner at Blustein, Shapiro, Frank, and Barone. Our phone number at the office is 845-291-0011. And we have a wonderful website. It's www.mid-hudsonlaw.com.
All right, Megan. You know, last time I talked to you, we talked about poor Uncle Joe. You know, poor Uncle Joe had a problem. But I found out more about the problem because a lot of people were calling the radio station here wanting us to give them advice. We can't give out legal advice. But
nope, save that for the attorneys.
Yeah, but to follow up on poor Uncle Joe, come to find out that law firm number one couldn't get a percentage out of Uncle Joe's estate. And law firm number two, who Uncle Joe had his last will and testament done with, well, they're no longer in charge of his estate. But the judge ruled that he is placing a new executor on Uncle Joe's will. So that's where it stands.
Wow, an interesting turn of events.
Oh, it really, really, truly is. But I wanted to let you know that. I really did. So I don't know what's going to happen there with that. But, you know.
Very interesting. That's sort of how it works sometimes, especially when you're going through a probate proceeding, right, a court proceeding. It's really a roll of the dice. You hope that everything lines up, and through proper documentation and planning, it should run a little bit more smoothly. But Uncle Joe's situation sounds like an interesting situation.
It really does, right? So with planning ahead, excuse me, with planning ahead today, with planning ahead today, what type of topic do we have today?
So I thought that we would discuss how to plan either in advance or either in a crisis situation for the cost of long-term care. It's a big part of my practice. So not only do we estate planning attorneys and elder law attorneys try to make sure that the right documentation is in place, but we have a plan in place in case as our clients get a little bit older, they start to need some additional care in their home or assisted living or nursing home. And believe it or not, a big part of estate planning is addressing those care needs. It's not just after death planning, but also planning for disability. And so I would guess that maybe 80% of my estate plans involve some level of planning for long-term care needs in the future.
Wow. So how does one go about doing that?
Sure. So typically, if we're talking about proactive planning, that comes to me in the form of someone telling me that they need to either do some estate planning or update an existing estate plan. And when we talk about what their concerns are and what their goals are, often one of the things that they'll mention is that they're worried about, as they get older, how expensive nursing homes are and what will happen to all of their assets if they need to go into a nursing home, and how can they best preserve assets to make sure that there's something left over for the kids if their care needs are long and expensive. So in a proactive planning situation, we typically want to educate our clients about the different ways to plan for long-term care. And so basically that care can be paid for privately, which would mean that someone uses their own income, their own assets to pay for that care. But because that care is very expensive, it could mean that we quickly deplete someone's estate, which is usually something they want to avoid. So the other two methods of paying for long-term care would be long-term care insurance policies, which, you know, you and I don't sell. There's going to be insurance carriers that sell those kinds of products. And then Medicaid, which is a government benefit that actually assists with the payment of long-term care. But the tricky part about the Medicaid benefit is that it's one where you have to demonstrate that you meet certain financial criteria in order to become eligible. So the estate planning that we engage in allows for people to appear as though they meet that financial criteria while still protecting their assets. And generally we do that through the use of an irrevocable kind of trust.
Now, isn't it true, though, long-term care, and I'm not degrading, nursing homes, but generally when something like that happens, all the assets just disappear. I mean, isn't that true?
So, yeah, that's the concern. And so when there's no planning, that is the position that most people are left in. And the reason that the assets disappear is because long-term care, for those people that have experience with this, that cost of the long-term care on a monthly basis can range, I'd say, anywhere from $6,000 per month to upwards and in excess of $15,000 per month if the care needs are greater and we're talking about a nursing facility. So if we're paying for that care privately, it means that we're probably going to start with our income sources and the money that's in our regular checking and savings account to pay for those months. But that amount adds up very quickly. And so eventually people will be forced to deplete their savings and all of their other assets to pay for that care. But the exception to that would be through proper planning, we can actually prevent that from happening. And we can get a client eligible for Medicaid without them being required to deplete their assets, without the assets disappearing.
And a lot of times, doesn't the house always get grabbed up?
Sure. So a primary residence is treated a little bit differently than any other asset. And so it's going to depend on who's living in the house at the time that a person needs the care and things like that. But the house is something that the Department of Social Services and, the powers that be, they're not going to require that you liquidate your primary residence to pay for your care. But if you've depleted all of your other assets and the only thing left is the house, what the Department of Social Services, which administers the Medicaid benefit, they can begin to put a lien against the home to chip away at the equity in the house so that eventually, after the owner passes away, there's no value left in the home. So that is something that is an at-risk asset.
Boy, that's terrible. Now, you mentioned you can actually purchase insurance for something like this. Is that insurance terribly expensive?
It can be. It does tend to be, just because more and more people are needing that level of long-term care. So these insurance companies are expecting that they will likely have to pay for the care, which means that their costs are increased. And so that trickles back to the consumer in the form of premiums. So long-term care insurance policies can take many different forms. It can be a pure long-term care insurance policy that strictly pays for that long-term care benefit. It can be a hybrid policy that's somewhat combined with life insurance. And so there's basically two variations of that. But what it comes down to is that whatever amount of long-term care insurance, that portion of the policy that you don't end up using, the benefit is still reserved as an after-death payout. So there's a few different kinds of policies, and the premiums are a little different between each of them, but they also, in addition to being expensive, they also can be difficult to qualify for as well. You want to do it when you're a little bit younger, while your health is still pretty good. And then, of course, from the insurance company standpoint, what that tells them is that you're going to be paying the premiums for this policy a little bit longer since you're starting so early. And so that way they can recover some of the costs that would be incurred upon them to pay for your care. So long-term care insurance is a good thing to consider. Not everyone will be eligible and not everyone can afford it. But if you can get one of those policies, it is a really good tool in the tool belt to help protect assets and pay for good quality long-term care.
Right. I would assume, Megan, that having a reverse mortgage in a situation like this is not a good thing.
Well, I mean, reverse mortgages, again, are another kind of tool, and sometimes they are appropriate for someone's goals and needs. But I would say they're not they're not commonly the solution that we would rely upon, especially because if you're getting a reverse mortgage to try to somehow prepare for long-term care costs in the future, there's other ways that we can protect assets. So again, it's another tool. It's one that I would say is not that common to be used, just because I think that there are different ways that we can go about it.
Right. Megan, again, your contact information, please.
Yeah, so I can be reached by phone at the office at 845-291-0011, and then our website is www.mid-hudsonlaw.com.
All right. And, of course, you guys have excellent workshop. Do you have another one coming up soon?
We do, actually. It's going to be, I think this is next week already, June 24th. It's Tuesday. We do free workshops. They're available to the public. There's very limited seating, so we try to host them every other month just to make sure that there's something on the calendar for everybody. And the workshop lasts about 2 hours, and it's really a discussion of estate planning basics. We kind of cover everything that a person would need to know if they're starting to think about doing an estate plan or updating their plan, including talking about Medicaid and the rules surrounding that benefit and how to prepare for it.
That's so excellent, too, that you guys actually do this. But we're talking about long-term health care, and that is something that people really need to seriously sit down and think about.
Sure. Yeah, and I think it is something that people do spend some time thinking about, but generally they do it as they get a bit older. Often my clients will start discussing long-term care when one of their parents begins to need care, and they see how difficult it is, and it's very taxing on the family, and it's very expensive. And they start to ask me, are there ways that this could have been avoided, right? Is there something that we could have done better? And if so, can I put that in place for myself so I don't go through what my mom or dad just went through? So often people are discussing long-term care needs with me right around retirement age. So, early mid-60s is when I'll usually start getting those kinds of questions, but it's really never too late to plan for long-term care. Some of my clientele is family members of people who are entering a nursing home at that time, and they've never done any proactive planning. So we call that a crisis Medicaid file. And in those instances, we still have strategies available to us to protect and preserve assets. Certainly, if you get the plan going earlier in your life, we can preserve more. But even if your loved one is on the door of a nursing home, they're entering the nursing home now, they've had a health crisis, we can still protect assets and preserve something so that there's something left over for the family.
Right. Now, what if an individual has term life insurance and the term isn't up yet, and they need to have long-term care? Can they collect on that term life insurance policy?
Typically not. A term policy does not often come with any kind of a cash value associated with it. So the rule of thumb for long-term care and life insurance would be that if there is any cash value that the owner can draw from, then Department of Social Services would expect, so that, again, that's for the Medicaid benefit, they would expect that that individual use up that cash value before they ask the government to pay for their care. Now, through proper planning, we can actually protect that cash value so that the client won't be required to draw from it and deplete the value of the policy. But without proper planning, that would be an asset that's available to that person, and they're expected to use that for payment for their care before Medicaid, the government, will pay for the care. But term policies don't often have a cash value associated with them, so that's going to be a policy that would essentially be ignored, at least by the Department of Social Services, in determining whether that person is eligible for Medicaid or not.
Wow. And I guess this is kind of a silly question, but I guess if you have to go into long-term care, what's the outcome with Social Security?
So your Social Security benefit is going to be income to you. And when you're needing long-term care, generally the expectation is that you're going to be using your income to pay for that care, at least some level of that care. Now, New York, surprisingly, is a very good place for long-term care Medicaid. There are a lot of exceptions and loopholes and strategy options that are available to people in order to qualify for Medicaid and still protect assets and even income, depending on the kind of care that they're needing. And so when we're thinking about long-term care, we're actually thinking about it as almost two branches. There's community care, so someone stays in their own home and a caregiver comes to them to help them with their daily tasks, or assisted living. That's considered community care. And then the other branch is nursing home level care. And in a community care setting, there's a strategy, at least available in New York. I'm not sure about other states, but it's something called a pooled income trust. And through that kind of a strategy, using that pooled income trust sort of account, we can preserve some income. So Social Security would fall into that realm, where if the applicant, the person who's needing the care, is going to stay within the community, there are steps we can take to try to save the income, including Social Security.
All right, where does, where does hospice come into focus here with this?
Sure. So hospice is more for end-of-life care, right? So typically we want some kind of a doctor's determination that the individual has a life expectancy of 6 months or less is typically where we're going to find hospice is recommended. Now, at least from my experience locally, the level of care that's provided by hospice and the organizations that are administering it is very good. Like, hospice is a wonderful quality of care, and it's really helpful to the family and to the person who's declining because they're just really compassionate caregivers and provide for a lot of needs in ways that maybe other services can't provide. And when I say can't, it's not that they don't want to. It usually has to do with staffing shortages. But hospice is a wonderful benefit for those people who are reaching sort of their end of life and need comfort and care measures for the duration of the time that they're still with us. So the hospice benefit is something that can be paid for privately, but often there is some component that's paid for by Medicare. And then hospice can be provided to a person in their own home or in a facility. And if it's in a facility, there's a little bit more expense to that because the person's in a room and using resources. So it's a combination of different sources of payment, including Medicare, private payment, and even Medicaid sometimes.
Now, as far when my mom had hospice in her house, that's where she wanted to be. That's where she wanted to stay. And when they came in, I agree with you. What a wonderful organization hospice is. They did everything for her. As a matter of fact, they actually had, I guess they were called visiting nurses that
Sure.
came in 2-3 times a week. And hospice was there almost a full day. They had a body lift for her and everything. And they were just absolutely wonderful. I can't say enough good things about hospice.
I totally agree with you. I have many people who call me on behalf of their loved one, their parent typically, and when they're in hysterics, they don't know what to do, they don't know which way to turn, and now the doctor is recommending hospice care. And a lot of times for them, they feel like, my parent doesn't need hospice yet. They're not dying. I'm in denial a little bit, things like that. But the very real conversation is that hospice care, the quality of hospice care is wonderful. And if someone is unfortunately declining, which happens to all of us, right? If someone's declining and a doctor is beginning to recommend hospice, I often encourage the family members to take advantage of that care because it is just such good quality care. Their loved one is going to be so well cared for. It's going to really take a lot of the pressure off of the child or whoever else is trying to help in the situation. So, like you said, I highly recommend hospice care, at least locally, because that's the only experience I have, is wonderful level care.
Oh, yeah. I couldn't agree with you more. So the long-term care situation is something that really everyone seriously has to sit down and think about.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, if we're fortunate enough to live into our old age, right, then eventually we're going to start to experience some level of decline. And as we decline, our options are to rely on our kids, our friends, our other family members to care for us, which most people don't want to put that burden on their family members.
Right.
And a lot of times family members are not even available to do that. And so if then we start to consider the other options for who will help us when we can't do things for ourselves, we have to think about how are we going to pay someone to come in and assist with this. And you can privately pay for that care, but everyone should be aware that there is the Medicaid benefit. And like I said, New York is a wonderful place to plan to qualify for Medicaid. So you can actually qualify for Medicaid without being required to deplete your assets. You can save money and still have Medicaid pay for your helpers.
Now, what if, this is a big what if, you fill out your last will and testament and you name an executor on your last will and testament, but however, because you're going to have long-term care, the executor doesn't want anything to do with that. So what happens there in that case?
So the executor in your will is really only going to come into play after you pass away. And it doesn't mean that that same person is necessarily going to be the person who assists you while your health begins to decline. You can pick different people for different positions. However, typically when we do our planning, we do want to list helpers like an executor or an agent, a power of attorney, or a healthcare agent. We want to list them in an order of succession because we can't force anyone to perform the task that we're giving them. And certainly there are people who will decline for any reason. They feel like, Medicaid is beyond them. They don't understand long-term care. They don't want to be associated with it. Or maybe they're just very busy in their own lives and they can't do it at the time they're called upon. So if executor or healthcare agent or power of attorney number one doesn't want to perform their duties, we should anticipate that in our planning, and we should have a backup agent or backup executor, and maybe even 2 or 3 in the list. A lot of times people are concerned about appointing someone that they trust and they're very close with because that person is around the same age as them or even older. And so especially in those instances, I tell them that's okay, because if this is your number one pick, we should have them in the first position. But then anticipating that maybe they will also be declining or will have passed before you, we can have person number 2 and person number 3. So we do want to have an order of succession in case someone that we've chosen doesn't want to or can't perform their duties.
How many orders of succession should one have on their last will and testament?
I typically like to see at least 2 or 3 individuals listed. It depends very much on the situation. If the person in the first position is someone that we feel is pretty unlikely to serve, then we want to have a few more backups. But if the person that we're choosing in the first position seems very reasonable and like they are a good option to serve, we probably don't need as many people to fall back on. But I would say at least 2 or 3. You can name as many as you want, though.
Wow. Megan, I tell you, I don't mean to make this a personal reference, but, excuse me, but I am going to tell you this. I feel fully blessed. I really, truly do. Because I have 3 really good friends, and they have a lot of health problems. And here I am at the age I am, and I've never had anything seriously go wrong with me.
That's wonderful.
I'm very, very blessed that way. But here I have a wife that has had multiple strokes, and plus heart surgery, and she's 10 years younger than I am. And just recently, she had a seizure because her blood sugar level went down. So I'm wondering what type of planning I should have for her.
Sure.
It's making me kind of go batty in my head because I don't even know where to begin.
Yeah. Well, I think the first step is working with an attorney that has the knowledge and experience that you probably don't have for yourself, right? This is why we rely on professionals for all kinds of things. I don't know how to fix plumbing in my house, so I'm going to call the plumber. I can't pull my own teeth out when I need to. I call a dentist. So an attorney is absolutely going to be something that you want to take advantage of, that professional advice. And an attorney that practices in estate planning and elder law is going to be the kind of attorney that has experience with the benefits that might be available to your wife, the planning that you and your wife should engage in. So I often have clients like yourselves where one spouse is maybe suffering from some health concerns and the other spouse is healthy enough, and still both spouses should be doing planning. I would say foundational planning, like making sure that you both have good powers of attorney in place for financial management if you can't do it, with successors in place in case your first choice can't perform their duties, healthcare proxy, HIPAA authorization, living will, and then at least fundamentally a will in place to dispose of assets for eventually if you do pass away. But then on top of that, we can start talking about what kind of government assistance could your wife qualify for right now? Is there any maneuvering of assets that we need to do in order to get her eligible for those benefits? And there are. Your wife could qualify for several different benefits based on her health needs.
Oh, wow. It looks like I need to get a hold of a good attorney like you.
It does sound like that's the case.
Megan, I think you're just so wonderful, and your law firm is absolutely awesome. We've heard from so many people, and it was all good comments about your law firm. How about giving us the numbers that we need to know, and how do our listeners get in touch with your law firm?
Sure. So they can reach me at 845-291-0011. We're the law firm of Blustein, Shapiro, Frank, and Barone. Again, my name's Megan Conroy. We have a website that people can visit. It's www.mid-hudsonlaw.com. On that website, there's ways to contact us. There's also ways to sign up for those workshops that are free.
Now, you also have other offices in the area, correct?
Our primary location is out of Goshen at 10 Matthew Street, but we do have a secondary location in the Monticello area. So we have offices up there as well. Some of our attorneys are housed out of that office permanently, but we can take advantage of either location to do our planning.
Wow. And can you believe that this is the first full day of summer on a Saturday? Wow. How about that? And it looks like we're going to be going into a heat wave, too. Whoa.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the warmer weather, honestly.
Are you really?
Mm-hmm.
Whoa, not me. I don't fare well in the heat, believe me. I'm going to stay comfy, cozy in the central air conditioning, and I'm going to plop my butt down in my recliner, and that's where I'm going to stay.
Good for you.
And then, can you believe the 4th of July is right around the corner?
I can't believe it. This year is flying by already.
It is, right? So let me ask you this. Do you have plans of loading up your barbecue grill?
I think I'll probably visit other people and let them do the
Well, I hope you don't invite Joey Chestnut. Boy, and he's got the gold mustard belt, and that's going to be fun to watch, too, on YouTube or wherever you get your streaming from, with the Nathan's hot dog eating contest. I don't see how those guys can do that.
I don't understand it either. They're like superhuman.
Whoa, 76 hot dogs in 10 minutes?
Oh, my goodness.
I have trouble eating 2.
Yeah. Could you imagine what their blood work looks like?
Oh, boy. I'll tell you what, that can't be very healthy for you.
I don't think so either. I don't recommend it.
No, he needs a life insurance policy, Megan.
He does, and some good estate planning.
There you go. Oh, that's right. Megan, thank you so much for being with us, as always. And I look forward
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, and I look forward to chatting with you next month. We'll have another planning ahead.
That sounds wonderful. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, and one more time for all your contact information, please.
Sure. My name's Megan Conroy at Blustein, Shapiro, Frank, and Barone. The phone number there is 291-0011. Our website is www.mid-hudsonlaw.com.
Megan, again, thank you so much, and I hope you have a great weekend.
Thank you. You too.
Okay, Megan, take care now.
Bye-bye.
Fox Oldies WGNY.